I want to thank you today for being here with us. I am Housing Committee Chair for NAACP. We greatly appreciate your time and your energy today. I first want to start off by saying, again, thank you for being here with us today. And we hope this is very informative for you because we don't want this to be a pity party. We want this to be a growth of knowledge party. So we're going to make sure that you have the knowledge that you need to stay in your homes, or the knowledge that you need to take back to your respective areas, so that we can keep everyone with a roof over their head. Homeless numbers are going up, and we do not want to add to that. We want to make sure that you keep in mind that you have the NAACP, who has a plethora of information and tentacles that can reach out and touch people. If you know that someone is struggling on their home, please let us know. And we want to be able to help them to stay in their properties, their roof over their head. Whether they're renting or owning, we want to help assist in any way we can. Again, I want to start off by saying thank you to yourselves. I want to thank our president for allowing us to put this together today. That's Ms. Francine Maxwell. So Madam President, would you like to give some words at this time, ma'am?
Thank you so much, Derek. I just wanted to say welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. The NAACP San Diego branch appreciates the panelists. We appreciate our housing committee, and I can't wait to learn such valuable information that we can share. And so with that, I like to introduce, we like to make sure that we highlight what our councilwoman is doing. And so today we have her chief of staff. So we have Councilmember Montgomery Steps, Chief of Staff, Mr. Henry Foster III.
Thank you, ma'am.
Henry?
Did we lose him?
You're muted.
There you go. And thank you. And on behalf of Councilmember Monica Montgomery Stepp, I bring greetings and hope everyone is staying safe as we continue to deal with these challenging times associated with COVID-19 and the pandemic. I'd like to also thank the NAACP San Diego branch and President Francine Maxwell. As we see, she came on. She's in the vehicle, I'm sure, going from one meeting to the next, and is constantly out there fighting and putting her best foot forward to stay on those front lines. As indicated, my name is Henry Foster, Chief of Staff for Councilmember Montgomery Stepp, and it's a pleasure to be here today and bring these words of greeting. As you all know, our communities have been severely impacted by the COVID-19. The economic impacts have been astonishing. And I think it furthers the need to have forums like this and really want to highlight the importance of working to keep our families together and to keep our families safe. With that, just want to from the council members' heart and a personal touch, the work that the NAACP does is really near and dear to her. And again, just want to thank each of the individuals that make things happen. Want to say a personal thank you on her behalf because your organization is needed. It is a lifeline to our community. And just want to make sure, as it's a volunteer organization, we all need to understand that, that you guys are out there working hard and putting forward that good fight. So a personal thank you from the council member. Also, the importance of this housing is a need that we all have. And we must work together during these challenging times. In addition to the issues surrounding eviction specifically, we've also have been working diligently to put together a rent relief program. And the council member has, that's been the top priority of hers. And she really wants to make sure that we don't see families displaced. As most of you are aware, on March 16th, the governor issued an executive order which allowed municipalities the authority to halt evictions for renters and homeowners. Then on March 25th, the city council passed its first moratorium on evictions, its first ordinance. In addition to the ordinance, the council member was at the forefront and working with her colleagues to establish a rent relief fund. To date, the city has allocated approximately $25 million as part of the CARES Act funding to rent relief. And also based on the announcements by Mayor Gloria yesterday, we have another $42 million in relief coming to the city of San Diego, which will be critical in the efforts to make sure we keep our folks housed. To ensure the protections remain in place also, on Tuesday, the 26th, the council will be taking action to make sure we don't have any interruption with our eviction moratorium ordinance. So that's on the council agenda for Tuesday, the 26th. We have had an opportunity to meet with the mayor's staff, and I must tell you, the mayor hit the ground running, and he looked at the existing ordinance and decided that he wanted to dive in and to make some further revisions and updates to help us achieve our goals and objectives, and to really just try and have a sense of security there for our residents and families as we're going through these tough times. As always, we encourage everyone to stay engaged. Contact the mayor's office, contact all the city council offices, come down to the city council meetings and voice your concerns. If you see the ordinance, you think there's improvements, reach out to our office that can be made. We're always open to take those comments, those concerns, and take them to the mayor's office and sit down, roll our sleeves up, and see what we can do better, right? We're always open to that type of dialogue. So please call us. Again, thank you. On behalf of Councilmember Montgomery Stepp, for allowing us to be here today. And again, the office really does appreciate the work of the NAACP San Diego branch, and we look forward to working together as we move forward through these challenging times. So with that, Madam President, I will turn it back over to Mr. Luckett or yourself and let you guys get to the work and inform our families. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Madam President, you're on mute. We could not hear you.
Oh, I just said, Derek, thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, Henry, we do want to thank you, and please make sure that you give Mrs. Stepp our regards, and we thank her for allowing you to be with us today.
Definitely. Thank you.
Appreciate you. Thank you. The next thing that we're going to be doing is making sure that I give thanks where thanks is due, and that's to everybody that has been spending time to put this committee together to give you the information that you need. That group of folks, most of them are going to be on the panel, but I also want to take the time and thank Michael. Michael has worked hard and diligent to pull everybody together, so we have to give credit where credit is due. Thank you so much, Michael Gillespie, for everything that you've been doing. I know Steve's been working with you also, so everybody who helped to make this happen, thank you for your time and your energy. So what we're going to do is go right into the eviction town hall. And by doing that, I also mentioned to you a few moments ago that there was some people that helped in his putting all this stuff together for us. So I want to make sure that I go ahead and introduce each person that's going to be speaking. So it's not that you're speaking at this moment, but I want everybody to know that you're here so they can get their thought process together. And some rules of the road is that if you have any questions, we're not going to be answering that right now. What we're going to ask you to do is just drop it over into the chat so that we can make sure that it goes to the right person. And if anybody else needs to chime in on it, that's on our panel, we'll be able to answer your questions and make sure that you get the information that you need before you get off the Zoom meeting here. The first person that I'd like to thank would be Ms. Tracy Walsh for joining us today. Ms. Tracy Walsh, who handles disability rights for California. We have Grace Martinez. Thank you again, Grace, for being with us and working with Michael as well. Grace Martinez, Alliance of California for Community Empowerment. Then we also have Ms. Laura Nunn from San Diego Housing Federation. Thank you, Laura. We have Nora Passon from CSA, and I think CSA is CSA San Diego County. And I'm sure they'll correct me if I'm off balance here or incorrect. And I have Alec Hannaford from A Socialist Alternative. And then we also have Catherine Mendonca. I hope I did not mess that up, Miss
Mendonca.
Oh, see, I knew I was going to mess it up. I'm so sorry. Okay.
All good.
Please don't take it personal, all right?
No worries.
And we're so used to just saying Cat, I guess, so we don't get to say the whole name, but we're glad you're with us today. And then we're going to have a tenant, and I'm just going to call her Nicole. Nicole is going to give us some insight as to what she's experienced and being evicted. And we want to be able to talk with her a little bit more in regards to that, or maybe give her some insight in regards to that. So with that being said, I'm going to start off by asking, and I'm just going to go in the order that I call the names just to stay on point here. I'm going to go with Ms. Tracy Walsh. Ms. Walsh, we know that the eviction process, first, before I ask you to chime in, I just kind of want to lay a little bit of a foundation. We all know that there's a red line. We've heard of the red line before, and if you haven't, that's almost a line, an imaginary line that kind of divides the, I'm not going to say the have from the have-nots, but I will say from maybe a little bit more wealthier than the people who have it than the person who need it the most. So it's a dividing line. In San Diego, we need to know where that line is. And if you didn't know where it is, I'm going to tell you right now, it's everything south of the 8 freeway. So that's the imaginary line that we deal with on a daily basis. So by people being evicted, it won't be the people that are just here today, or it won't be, the impact will be more severe, should I say, probably south of the 8 than north of the 8. So what we have to know is that we have to have the right tools in place for anyone, no matter where you are in the county of San Diego. We want to be a resource, and we need to make sure that you're provided the opportunity to know what those resources are, and to know that you, as a person who may be going through that, or if you have family members going through it, to know that you have some resources that you can count on to help give you advice and help guide you through the process. So I'm going to ask Ms. Walsh, can you give us some insight as to what you know or your organization do when it comes to people with disabilities, or people that you know that can benefit from your organization? Can you give us some insight on how that affects people who are maybe going through evictions? Can you give us your insight on that, please?
Sure. Thanks so much, Mr. Lickett. Thanks everybody for having Disability Rights California here today. I'll just go ahead and start with my presentation, because I'll probably touch on a few of those items. See if I can get my screen going here. Okay, can you see that, everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
See that? Okay, great. Alrighty. So once again, my name is Tracy. I'm a registered legal services attorney at Disability Rights California. A lot of people don't know we are a statewide agency. So even if you know folks outside of the red line in San Diego, we are available for phone conferencing throughout the state. As has been stated, the pandemic has put everybody in a horrible state. There was a LA Times article that came out yesterday, said that more than 1.9 million Californians were behind on rent last month alone. But the pandemic isn't the only thing that's been going on. There's been inequities in our systems for, in some cases, centuries. I put a couple of the heavy hitters up here on the board. One of the big ones is wages. Wages haven't increased with the cost of inflation. $2 in 1960 doesn't even reach the fight for 15 we're angling for today. Enormous racial wealth gaps have left people without a rainy day fund. There is actual literal maps where you can see codified redlining and reverse redlining, where, especially the most famous maps are in Detroit, where the Black communities there were denied credit. And even recently, people have been getting much higher charges for credit. On top of it, the student loan crisis is upon us. There used to be way more federal funds that went to education, but that turned into instead granting students student loans. So now students are able to access school, but they have to carry the burden of that debt on their shoulders. Even if you're on income-based repayment, that's still 10% of your net income. I have a chart here that shows just the inequity among people of color, as well as a kind of old chart from 2015, but even the stats at that time were that 25% or 20%, sorry, of Californian households spend more than 50% of their income on housing. People are only supposed to be spending around 30% of their net income on housing, but when you got another 10% for student loans and then 50% for housing, that's eaten away at whatever funds people were able to save with their lowered wages. Then with this current eviction crisis, this is coming on top of the 2008 housing crisis. So there are many more homeowners who are now tenants. So that's crunching the numbers on the available numbers of units. Plus, banks that foreclosed on properties after the 2008 crisis did not flood the markets with those foreclosed homes. They held on to the properties and controlled the markets. And now what had happened before with mortgage-backed securities, where a bunch of private investors were making money off of the monthly mortgage payments that were bundled together as a package. Now these private investors have realized it's way easier to evict people than it is to foreclose on people. So now they have rent bundles. Okay, so you have private equity firms that are have turned housing into a commodity. It's no longer about providing nice quality housing. It's about how can we eke every cent out of this security we have. Additionally, there have been the rise of businesses, not to hate on Airbnb too much, but that has taken rental units off the market. So there are more and more people fighting for less units with less funds to deal with. So evictions can feel like a very isolating experience, but it's important to keep in mind that like pretty much every inequity in this country, it's a macro level policy that's going on. It's not just the individual. And then from my outside perspective, I'm from Chicago. I moved here 9 months ago, and I was astounded to learn what's going on here in California with eviction law. In Chicago, you can raise counterclaims against your landlord. So in the same lawsuit that's being put against you, you can have a counterclaim and make the landlord be a counter defendant. You can't do that in California. There's no guaranteed court status date. I don't know of another area of law where you don't at least get an initial status state. In evictions in California, if a tenants don't file a responsive pleading in court, a final judgment can be entered against them off call, even by a clerk, not even by a judge. Finally, is a little thorn of eyesight seeing the code when I read it. It just bothers me. In there, it says tenants can be guilty of an unlawful detainer. Evictions are called unlawful detainers in California. There's no way that you can be guilty of a civil claim. Okay, this is not criminal law, but it's just even the words that are used in eviction make people feel bad. But it's these codes were not written by tenants. It's important to keep this all in mind. So then turning to just a few things, we want to make sure that everybody takes away about evictions. I'm going to just put a few highlights on the board here. In the resource that I mentioned earlier, we go into way more in depth about, there are flowcharts for visual learners. We try to make sure that all of our writing is accessible. So please review those publications for further details, but just a couple highlights. Takeaways that we'd appreciate everybody knowing is that self-help evictions are illegal. So a landlord can't say, I want you out of your apartment by tomorrow, change the locks on the door, turn off the utilities. That doesn't work. You can only be evicted if a court order has been entered against you and the sheriff is there knocking on your door. To start the eviction process, it must start with a notice. So notices can come in different timeframes. They could be 3 days, 15 days, 60 days, 90 days, 30 days. But they all start with this written notice that you receive, likely from your landlord or a landlord's agent. Once that time expires, let's just say a 30-day notice, when that expires, then the landlord can go to court and file a summons and a complaint. So that's the lawsuit, is the complaint. The summons is a document that tells you what courthouse you're in and what your deadlines are to file a responsive pleading, and the complaint's on the right, and it's a standard summary proceeding form in California courts. So when a tenant gets something that looks like that, then they know that the clock is ticking. So it's important to keep in mind until they've received that court paper, any threats from the landlord don't mean that the tenant is at true risk of more of a, formal legal proceeding against them.
Okay, Miss Walsh, can I
Yes.
ask you to maybe in the next 60 seconds to kind of wrap it up so I can get to the others, and we're going to come back, circle back around to you as well, if that's okay.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't realize the format here. So just a couple of things to keep in mind. There's a 5-day deadline to file a responsive pleading so that you can get a court date. You can file a fee waiver if you can't pay the filing fee. You can file to have a jury hear your case instead of a judge. Discovery, which is basically obtaining information from the other side, is allowed in evictions, and it's very important to keep in mind that settlements are an option in unlawful detainers. You can do a pay and stay if you want to keep staying in the property. You can try to get your back rent waived and relocation expenses paid for, and try to get your record masked. Tenants can also raise some defenses and raise what they could have raised as counterclaims in alternate venues, which one of my colleagues is going to get into later. The main thing that tenants should know to do is to document everything. Lawyers are not special, they just deal with facts. So if something happened to you on July 26th where you asked the landlord for XYZ, write it down in a notebook. On this date at this time, I asked for this, this was the response. You're always more credible to the court if you have exact facts. And then just a little bit about DRC. We take a very expansive view of people with disabilities. A lot of times people don't identify with the disability community. Just want to put this definition up on the board here to make sure that people understand that, they may have something here that would entitle them to our services. And for even folks that are not in the disability community, we have these resources on our site that are included in the guide that'll go out to you. We have another one that we're planning on getting together in the next couple of weeks and should have that published. So please check back in. This is our phone number here. We take calls every day except Wednesday. The caller does need to have a disability or someone in the household having a disability for eviction cases, but we're happy to provide counsel and advice over the phone. At the self-help centers, they can't give you advice, they can help you in the procedures, but if you call us, perhaps we're able to guide you on what evidence you may want to present, why, and what your options may be. And that's it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate all that information. You got a lot for us to grasp. I do want to say I'm from Chicago as well, so welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Talk about that. We'll talk about that offline. Ms. Grace, I'm going to call on you next. Can you give us some information about the Alliance of California for Community Empowerment? What does it do? How can it help someone if they're going through eviction? And what can we expect if they gave you a call?
Okay, so my name is Grace. I'm the director of San Diego ACE. It's the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment. I know it's a crazy acronym. So ACE we are a statewide organization with local chapters throughout the state. Here in San Diego, we're primarily concentrated in the South Bay, where we have newer chapters like Imperial Beach, and now definitely parts of like central part of San Diego, the city of San Diego. But we've done a lot of work in Chula Vista, in National City. And as we've continued to fight around housing, we've definitely now are in the North Bay. The way that we work is we're a community union. So we have membership, like these are volunteers, a lot of them are tenants. ACE, has worked on a lot of different issues like community issues, but I've been organizing for 17 years, and I can tell you every city I've been in, and I'm from San Francisco, so let me tell you about gentrification. It's housing has been the biggest fight. And I think the reality is that, and you've heard this from Tracy, you'll probably hear this from other partners, is housing is very racialized. There's a lot of history around it. Even the characteristics of what we think of a homeowner, is definitely the negative characteristics that we think of a renter. And, and I think that a lot, especially in a lot of communities of color, and especially in the Black community, home ownership is definitely the gold standard, because it's our permanence, right? And in many cases, and I'm definitely not going to speak for the Black community, but you know, if you look at a lot of Jim Crow laws from the South, you look at a lot of you know, just racist laws like the Asian land laws in California,
Mhm.
many of us were forbidden from being able to own land, and or made it very, very difficult. There's always caveats. So many of us through over a course of generations are renters, right? And also the foreclosure crisis created another set, right? So ACE has been on the front line around the foreclosure crisis. Please never talk to me about a foreclosure again, but I definitely will listen to your foreclosure case. Our membership has definitely fought, and these are people who are impacted directly by the issue, have fought on both local levels, on state levels, to pass like the homeowner bill of rights, which is definitely not perfect, but you know, something that actually would regulate modifications, and really working with Kamala Harris at the time to come up with like real settlements. Now we've been focused on working on statewide protections like AB 1482, which passed last year. That was a fight. And the way that we fight is through direct action, right? It isn't just like as an organizer, it's not my job to speak on behalf of the members. It's really working with our membership, people who are impacted, to speak for themselves and do it in an organized way. So that really shows up in different ways, right? For us, like why our work has changed right now is because during the pandemic, the reality is that people have lost their jobs. People are having to choose between food and rent, and the most local fights in San Diego have been local moratoriums. Then AB 3088, which is expiring at the end of the month. And now there's a lot of moving pieces with these protections, but one thing that I want to be clear for everyone on here is that if you are impacted by COVID-19, you have protections. There are, I'm hoping it's the follow partners will talk about like how you enact those protections. There are things moving on the statewide level right now that it's I'm not going to use some profanity, but you can imagine it's a moving target. And you know, the legislature is going to vote next week about what those rights are going to look like and what the relief for tenants are going to look like. And you know, we are lucky to be in a place in San Diego where the mayor's taking the initiative. I haven't seen the full proposal. I know that the mayor did make their rounds to a lot of housing groups to give best recommendation. I can tell you that Oakland is the gold standard for this. I think for the beginning of the year, they had one eviction in court because their local policy made it that the only evictions that can happen were health and public safety. Because we do know, and this is studies that are coming out, is that we do know that there is a link between people who are evicted and also exposure to COVID. LA, as you see that, aside from the density issue, people are having to double up. So we know that this is a public health issue, and we have to continue to fight and organize. And ACE is a part of a local coalition, which is more radical because we need to be radical now, right? It's not the time to hope and pray. The time is to really like push and fight. About the Cancel Rent Coalition, we have some partners here who can even talk about the direct activism. But like, if people are interested in joining that coalition, Cancel Rent Coalition, or even the partners we have on this table, ACE, we organize tenants, we even organize just pretty much for people who support, and it's really for those tenants to actually draft and steer the campaign as we move forward. I don't know if that answers the question.
You did great.
Thank
You
you.
did great. I'm gonna come back to you though. And I appreciate you all being patient with me because I'm trying to get everybody the opportunity to speak. So then we'll circle back around and really have a conversation about some of these assembly bills that are on the table. And you've said some couple of things that I made notes on that I'll bring back to you as well. I'm going to go with Laura Nunn.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you, Tracy and Grace, for really kind of setting the table here for this discussion today. I'll go ahead and share my screen and pull up my presentation. Can everyone see this? Great. So first of all, thank you for having me here today. My name is Laura Nunn. I'm the Chief of Policy and Education with the San Diego Housing Federation. We are a nonprofit membership-based organization that advocates for the creation and preservation of affordable housing. There's my email address. Our belief is that a safe, stable place to call home is the basis for all other successful outcomes in life: social, medical, educational, financial, vocational. And because of this, as was mentioned by the previous speakers, it's very much a social, racial justice, equity issue, and we center that in our work as well. I just want to provide some information on kind of the moving pieces on eviction moratoriums. So at the federal level, as of the 20th, the federal eviction moratorium issued by the Centers for Disease Control has been extended until at least March 31st of this year. This is expected to just serve as a placeholder as Congress and the new president work on longer term solutions, including rental assistance. At the state level, as Grace mentioned, there's AB 15, the Tenant Stabilization Act of 2021, that would extend the eviction moratorium established by last year's AB 3088. I dropped a link to that bill in the chat, so if you'd like to take a look, obviously it's a moving pieces, as Grace mentioned, but you can see the current bill language at that link. And this bill would extend the moratorium on evictions to December 31st, 2021, so long as tenants pay at least 25% of the rent due. There are other, as my understanding, there are also discussions about tying the end of the moratorium to certain public health and economic indicators as well, because as we know, just at the moment that a public health emergency ends, the economic impacts don't go away overnight. At the local level, Henry mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting, the San Diego City Council will hear an item at their January 26th meeting to extend the local eviction moratorium. As proposed, the eviction moratorium would remain in place until 60 days after the city lifts the state of emergency related to COVID-19. I also popped into the chat the staff report for that item. If you're interested, the city has on their website instructions and directions on how you can participate in that meeting and voice your position on the proposal. There are ways to do that before the meeting online by submitting a web comment, and there are also ways to join the council meeting by phone and by Zoom. Let's see. On the rental assistance piece, because we know that the eviction moratoriums are only as powerful as they relate to being able to actually help people out financially, in terms of accumulating long-term rental debt, rental assistance. We see eviction moratoriums and rental assistance as having to go hand in hand. So what's been discussed there is President Biden has requested Congress to set aside $30 billion to help households behind on rent. That would be in addition to the $25 billion in emergency rental assistance that's currently coming from the federal government to the states for them to administer. California is expected to receive $2.6 billion in federal rental relief from that $25 billion. It's ongoing, discussions at the state and how that will be administered. But I believe as a part of that is where we are getting that announcement from Mayor Todd Gloria about an additional $42 million in emergency rental assistance to be administered by the San Diego Housing Commission. And very notable that the initial investment of $25 million into that fund, this is nearly double that, and it's definitely needed. At the state level, there's AB 16, a bill that I also put the link in the chat that has to do with kind of the longer term impacts of rental debt for residents who were impacted by COVID-19. And that bill is kind of also an ongoing discussion related to that, the city of San Diego, the eviction moratorium that's being discussed on the 26th proposes to convert rental debt to consumer debt, which is kind of important because it changes how the debt can be addressed and how it might be relieved. So that's just a really quick overview. I wanted to be quick here because I know we've got a lot of other very important information from our presenters. Just lastly, a few resources, the link to the City of San Diego Emergency Rental Assistance Program. At the moment, the application has closed, but I imagine it will reopen with the new infusion of resources. The link to the County of San Diego's Emergency Rental Assistance Program, and then a link to our website, housingsandiego.org, where you can learn more about our advocacy on, not only eviction protections, but also our advocacy around affordable housing. And kind of in line with some of the presentations earlier, we partner with the San Diego Regional Alliance for Fair Housing every year on a conference on the topic of fair housing. And we have that conference coming up on April 7th and 8th this year. If you're interested in kind of exploring more the topics that were addressed by previous presenters. And I will stop share. I just wanted to give a quick run through and thank you. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Laura. We appreciate that. That was good information. As I stated, I'm writing down some questions for you guys, so be ready. Okay, they're coming. Okay, so we also have Nora Passon. Is Nora still on?
I'm here, I was muted.
Oh, there we go.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Nora. I work with CSA San Diego. I serve as their legal counsel. So today I wanted to give everyone a little bit of information about what CSA is, the services they provide, and then try to provide information about fair housing as briefly as I can. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to share my screen now. Okay. So to provide background on the organization, CSA is a nonprofit agency. They're located in El Cajon and they provide housing counseling services. CSA works to prevent and eliminate fair housing discrimination, to promote fair housing outreach and education, and to work to ensure equal housing opportunity for its community. CSA has a number of housing counselors that are available to provide free housing advice and answer questions that individuals may have concerning their current housing or rental process. Some of the counselors are also trained certified mediators that can work with tenants and housing providers together in order to resolve housing-related issues and conflicts. They also have a great outreach team that works to educate people about fair housing and their rights under fair housing laws. So I'm going to go over what fair housing means and the protections that fair housing provides under both federal and state law, and then provide some examples about how people's rights to fair housing may have been impacted by the current pandemic we are experiencing, and provide some good resources to those who may have questions about fair housing or believe they may have experienced housing discrimination. So the Fair Housing Act essentially prohibits discrimination in housing across the United States on the basis of 6 general categories, which they label as race or color, religion, sex, national origin, familial status, and disability. In the state of California, the categories are greatly expanded in addition to the 6 protected under US fair housing laws. Examples of additional categories that we have here in California include source of income, marital status, and immigration status. A housing provider cannot use one of these protected categories as a reason to treat a tenant or renter differently, to assign different terms or rules to tenants and renters, or to harass anyone at the housing place, at the place of housing. All individuals have the right to exercise their rights under fair housing, meaning if an individual makes a complaint to either a private agency like CSA or to a government agency, it's illegal for the housing provider to retaliate against that person or to threaten eviction against that individual. The pandemic has affected fair housing in a number of different ways. Agencies like CSA are seeing an increase of complaints more so in certain protected categories. So I wanted to touch a little bit more on those today. The first is source of income. In California, housing providers must treat all income equally as long as the source is legal and verifiable. There is no requirement that you must be employed. Source of income includes payments from public benefits, retirement or disability, payments from investments or trusts, alimony, child support. Since last year, this has expanded to include housing subsidies, such as housing vouchers. With the amount of job loss that has been seen during the pandemic, a lot of individuals have had to obtain rental assistance through government agencies, through nonprofit organizations, and even through friends and family. These payments should be acceptable as third-party rental payments. And not only should they be accepted, but housing providers cannot treat tenants differently because they are using rental assistance. For example, they cannot refuse to perform maintenance-related repairs because somebody is receiving rental assistance. The next category we have found to be affected is race and national origin. When the pandemic first started, there was a lot of ideas of where it originated from, which has caused for discrimination. Reports have shown that racial discrimination generally, for example, against members of the Asian American community, has increased since the start of the pandemic, and it has trickled into housing as well. Housing providers cannot use comments or questions related to race or national origin to discourage people from renting or to treat their tenants differently from other tenants in the community. Next is familial status. Familial status discrimination occurs when a housing provider treats a renter differently because members of their family are under 18 years of age, meaning they have kids in the family. Examples are overly restrictive rules limiting the activities of daily life for families with children, including whether children can play outside. Right now, a lot of people have their kids at home because of distance learning and just for safety reasons during the pandemic. So there's been a lot of issues that have arisen with children playing and children using the common areas. Under this category, children have the right to fully use the property. Sometimes with familial status discrimination, it's not quite as ill-intended as other types of discrimination. Housing providers may think they are helping the community, but it's discrimination nonetheless. For example, if families with children are told that they have to live on the first floor for noise and safety, or if they attempt to put people with children all in one certain area of the complex for noise and safety, that would be considered familial status discrimination. Sexual harassment is also considered housing discrimination. Right now, with people using rental assistance or paying only portions of their rent as allowed by moratoriums, you often do see issues of sexual harassment, housing providers offering to waive rent for sexual favors or unwanted advances against people that they know are paying their rent late or are only paying portions. That is considered unlawful housing discrimination and should be reported right away. And then lastly, disability. I know Tracy quickly touched on reasonable accommodations. People that have disabilities under the Fair Housing Act are entitled to receive accommodations that are reasonable to help them equally enjoy the community. So with the pandemic, people that are immunocompromised or deemed high risk in terms of COVID-19 may also be entitled to reasonable accommodations that they wouldn't have previously requested. And the housing provider needs to work with them to be able to meet a reasonable accommodation for that individual. So I just wanted to give some resources. I have HUD's website, which is the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and California Department of Fair Employment and Housing's website. there, not only do they have a lot of really good information and examples and brochures, but they also have places where individuals can lodge complaints. So you can make a formal complaint to the government against a housing provider who has engaged in housing discrimination on either of these websites.
Well,
Also, go
oh,
ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
The Department of Justice has a sexual harassment housing initiative, and they're trying to collect complaints from people who have experienced sexual harassment in housing. So there's a good resource as well. And then lastly, I have the information for CSA, their phone number and their website, and they have housing counselors on call to answer any housing questions, to be able to assist people with their housing related needs, and assess whether or not somebody may potentially be facing housing discrimination.
Very good. I thank you so much. That's a lot of information to take in. And I know I've asked you guys to put a little short thing together, or Michael asked you to put it together and present it in 6 to 7 minutes. You guys are doing fantastic. Thank you so much for all of that energy that you put into that. I would like to see if Alec Hannaford is on.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Thanks. So I'm on my phone, so fortunately I can't pull up the slides right now, but I'll go ahead anyway. Thank you, Derek.
Sure.
I wanted to talk about what we've been doing with Socialist Alternative on a local level, as well as in other places. But I mean, we kind of view this as the biggest issue that's facing our local San Diegans, because I mean, nationwide something like 40 million, and in the state there's 2 million Californians that are at risk of being evicted, and I think it's getting worse. But we think that the solution is to cancel rent, because I think that there's a strong case. I think like the jobs really aren't coming back, meaning that when the moratorium ends, people aren't going to be able to come up with several months worth of accumulated rent debt out of nowhere. And I think that because in December last month, 15.8 million Americans said that they lost work from the pandemic. And I think it's worthy to bring up the fact that that's actually a growing number. It was 1 million people lower in November. So I think there's this growing case that can be made for forgiveness for this tremendous amount of debt that's going to be devastating to millions of families. So when this started in the spring, we had initially promoted a rent strike as a way of kind of asserting the power of tenant organizing. And I think this is a method of collective action that was meant to send a signal to the big landlords that said basically, to show them that they can't really get away with doing these self-help evictions, or these sneaky quasi-legal evictions that other speakers brought up. And I think this was how we saw the best way to empower tenants in their own networks. And we collected tens of thousands of signatures on this online rent strike pledge. It was actually a lot. And as a national organization, we've been reaching out to these tenants to connect them to other tenants in their buildings. And since then, we've pivoted towards other ways of meeting people and building these networks of people who want to get involved in the fight to cancel rent. Like Grace said, we think it's really important that the people who are affected, the millions of families that will be affected by this, we think those are the most important voices to have at the forefront of this movement. And we've been going out in public to meet people all over the place, really, supermarkets, parks, sidewalks, talking to people and asking them about, hey, are you a tenant facing eviction? Are you in a building? Having conversations and explaining to people how the battle to get rent cancellation is not going to be something that's given. It's going to be the byproduct of tenant organizing. And we have to make it clear that this is not something that we should allow politicians to sweep under the rug. And collective action is really central to this goal. And we've been doing this outreach in ways that have been, I mean, we have to be really important about social distancing because, as we said, like evictions and it fuel this cycle of the virus spreading. So what we have QR codes, which is it's like a barcode basically that folks can scan on their phone. Immediately, it'll pull up a form where they can fill out a questionnaire like, yeah, I'm a tenant. Are you a tenant in a building? Are you a tenant in a building with other tenants facing eviction? These are the kinds of steps that we want to take to build these networks. But due to the fact that there's been such a big spike recently in cases, we're shifting to more socially distant ways, like putting up flyers in apartment buildings, laundry rooms, stuff like that, where we can have the same QR code and gather that same information. And Socialist Alternative is a nationwide organization, and I want to real quickly touch on a member who's an elected city council member in Seattle, member of Socialist Alternative, and I think her name's Councilwoman Shama Sawant, and it's important. I think it's important to talk to her about her because she's a strong example of kind of what I think it looks like for an elected official to fight evictions. Recently, she fought to successfully get a tax on Amazon's headquarters to fund affordable housing, and is over the course of her career had a kind of a building different pieces of legislation as part of a project called the Tenants' Bill of Rights. Some of these things, like slumlords, were raising rents on people when the units and evicting people because the units were at the same time out of compliance, rats, broken pipes, all sorts of stuff. And her office helped pass this bill where they couldn't raise rents on out of compliant units. Other things like limiting move-in fees, and she banned eviction, helped prevent evictions in the winter months of the year. These are just some of the things in the Tenants' Bill of Rights, but currently there's a coalition of Republicans and billionaires trying to get her out of office. They're trying to file a recall campaign due to her involvement in the George Floyd BLM protest. And I think from day one, she's fought for tenants fighting evictions. She was arrested in 2013 for a civil disobedience sit-in at a house of a tenant facing eviction. And the reason I'm talking about it is just because I don't think there's not many politicians out there, I think, who are willing to kind of put themselves on the line like this. And I think that it sets a nationwide precedent of the kind of fight back we should have to fight this incoming crisis of evictions. If anyone's interested, I can put more information in a link in the chat, but really thankful to be here. A tremendous amount of respect for all our other panelists, and I'm really looking forward to working with the rest of you in the future. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Alec. Alec, I wish I had all your energy, man. I'd be fighting with everybody. I'm just gonna tell you right now. But when you get my age, you have to pick your battles carefully. Okay, so I'm gonna go to my next person. Is Kat still available? Kat, can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was trying to unmute.
Okay, Kat's with the Tenants Union. Hey, how you doing? Can you guys give us some information about the Tenants Union and what you guys do to help people in times of evictions?
Absolutely. And we were supposed to have a tenant on the call. I'm not sure what's going on, but there's a video I would like to play after I read our mission statements. So it's to implement the knowledge of tenant rights in underrepresented communities by training members, building leadership, organizing, and mobilizing through popular education. So basically it's putting the power of a union that someone would see for workers, for renters. So we do rapid response, addressing emergencies. Let's say there's flooding in studio apartments on a Saturday night we've went to. The heat has been cut off. The video that I would like to show all of you is actually one of our tenant members. Her name is Nicole Johnson. Unfortunately, I think we're having some technical difficulties. She was supposed to join us, but I sent Michael a video, which I think is very informative, that gives an eye-opening experience to not only Black renters and their struggles, because as Grace eloquently said, housing is racialized, but it's also the demographic of refugees in the City Heights community and the disconnect of not only language accessibility, but the capability of supportive service for people that are considered asylum seekers, refugees that have relocated and are still getting culturalized in the US. So Michael, are you able to play that video?
Hi, yeah, sorry. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to play it right now. I'm not sure how to, if I can just show it in Zoom. Maybe I can share my screen and just play it.
Sure.
I'm also gonna drop the link in the chat.
Okay.
And then,
so this was a
anybody-
okay, thank you, Michael. This was a KPPS story of what we call a corporate property management company for profit. And this is the end result of the consequences in areas such as City Heights.
Okay, so I'm gonna play it and then hopefully it comes through.
Great.
So the Esaloma family came to San Diego in 2016 from a refugee camp in
Can you turn it up a little bit, Mike?
They say since moving to their 2-bedroom apartment in City Heights, they've dealt with a broken stove and refrigerator and cockroaches in their apartment.
Back in Africa, we thought America was heaven.
America is not good.
But mold is still mold.
Where is the mold actually?
On a recent afternoon, Catherine Mendonça came to visit the Esalomas and other families living on Polk Avenue. She's a community organizer with the San Diego Tenants Union.
A lot of them are refugee and of immigrant status or non-citizen status. A lot of them have resettled and have just gotten acclimated with what it's like to live in America, as far as the routine, the schedule, and a lot of them aren't aware that there are rights with living in a home.
Nicole Johnson lives downstairs. She called the tenants union after getting eviction papers for not paying her rent. She says the people living here have been dealing with awful conditions and the managers responsible for her property are doing nothing to help.
We don't have a working stove. We don't have a working refrigerator. Their toilet was not on the ground properly, so where you could move it. The water, the feces water was leaking from the ceiling on me and my daughter.
Mendonça says it's a common problem she sees with low-income and minority tenants, especially when there's a language barrier like with the Esalomas. She says one of the top priorities of the tenants union is to notify renters of their rights.
People need to think of it more as a contract between two parties versus a landlord that is deciding everyone's fate. It's a mutual contract. When you pay each month, that means you and the property manager, landlord, et cetera, accepts that contract.
The tenants union also tries to serve as an advocate for renters when they have issues with their landlords. In this case, the properties on Polk Avenue are managed by Prime Asset Management. The owner made a site visit, but left before our scheduled interview. He told me over the phone that he hadn't received any work orders from the upstairs tenants and that the issues with Nicole Johnson's apartment had been resolved. He said their company has an online work order system, but acknowledged that it might be difficult to navigate for tenants who don't speak English. Refugee resettlement agencies regularly have to deal with situations like these. Donna Duvin is the executive director of the International Rescue Committee in San Diego, the agency that resettled the Esalomas.
I do think there's an element of this sense too, that if they are expressing concerns about their living environment, and if that isn't well received, then that also is risking the safety and stability of their families.
She says during the first 6 months after placing a family in housing, they see them almost every day. Sometimes caseworkers make home visits, but usually the families come to the IRC's offices. Duvin says the IRC tries to educate families about their rights, but it's often hard for them to understand that as tenants, they can speak up about housing problems. Christopher Ridgway is a real estate attorney. He says he frequently deals with habitability issues with tenants and that it's a landlord's responsibility to resolve most problems in a timely manner. He says a landlord could be sued if they don't.
If the population that they're dealing with isn't likely going to sue them, what then?
Then it becomes a moral question. Really, it's either a business question or a moral question. What's going to motivate somebody?
Excuse me one second, sweetie. I gotta take some footage.
Back on Polk Avenue, Mendonça says legal help is among the services the tenant union offers as part of a $25 a year membership.
This is a beautiful community. It is so diverse with how many people of different backgrounds live here. And they deserve the same living conditions as anybody else living in the US, regardless if they know it or not.
Since we started working on the story, Prime Asset Management says they're not going to evict Nicole Johnson from her apartment. The IRC has also offered to find new housing for the East Oklahoma. Priya Sridhar, KPBS News.
Thank you for showing that video.
Thank you, Michael. If I can wrap up with some impactful statements on what are the action plans. Now, obviously the Oklahoma, that is a direct consequence to lack of resources, lack of language accessibility, silence among the board of supervisors, city council members. I want to make it very clear, and I think comrades with ACE and Socialist Alternative agree with me on this. We are anti-displacement, anti-gentrification. Much of the conversations evolving around housing involve, oh, let's build affordable housing. What regulates that affordable housing once it's built? There is tons of affordable housing that once was affordable housing now, because there is no rent control, which after we're demanding to cancel rent, which Alec was talking about, because the jobs aren't coming back. There's debt that's accrued that there's no ability to pay. And how much rental assistance is going to be dished out to coddle these management companies such as Prime Asset without any type of negotiation. There needs to be something done to cap the rent so it is affordable. The Disability Rights Center did quote that, you know, there is no employment, there hasn't been no raise in for employment. There, you know, wages haven't increased. And what we're looking to do is to have people stay healthy and stay in their communities. We firmly believe that this is a form of, you know, obviously redlining is very prominent still. I would go so far as to this as being colonialism. This is a modern day colonialism in our communities, and it is a form of genocide. When you think about criminalization after being evicted, when you think about death because of COVID-19. So I want to make it very clear that, you know, with ACE and Socialist Alternative, part of the Cancel Rent Coalition is that we want to cancel the rent to keep people in their homes, period, regardless of whatever reason. Keep them in their homes, cancel the debt, cancel the rent, and implement rent control, because emergencies such as this happened long before COVID pandemic, and city officials need to speak up. The governor needs to take a stand against these predator property management companies, these investment firms.
And I'm going to have to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I agree with you 1,000%. And I believe if all 6 or 7 of our organizations got together, we can talk about this forever. But I want to give these folks that's on the line an opportunity to ask questions.
Okay, thanks, Derek.
So maybe they have a specific question for you. If not, I have one for you. So we definitely want to get to some question and answer period here. And we're right on time, by the way. I want to thank all my speakers. But again, I want to make sure that we do have questions. So if there's any questions, please drop it over in the chat box. I haven't seen any come up per se, but I do want to make sure that I ask a couple of other questions here while we're waiting on someone to put their brilliant questions in here. And I definitely want to go back and make sure also that this is not anyone's specific fault that evictions are where they are right now. COVID happened, it's a pandemic, but we also have to remember that there is racism involved in that pandemic for certain communities. There's systemic racism in there. You have all type of things that are governing to when you find people who don't speak the language and they're giving them contracts to sign that they don't know what they're signing, or if they put a work order in they can't get it. I mean, that video was very telling, and I do thank you for that. So my question would be, I was looking, and I believe it was Tracy. You were stating in regards to disability, two things about disability. One big thing that has been coming up is that people need a dog, and they're concerned that they're going to get evicted because no one will rent to them, da 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 da. And the other thing that I saw something about a reading disability, people with reading disabilities. Is that diagnosed by a doctor? Does that have to be you're on mute, I'm sorry.
Sure, sorry. Yes, so people are entitled to have service dogs in their home and also emotional support animals, even birds. I've seen case law about cats. It doesn't even have to be dogs. And so what they can do is submit, it's best to do it in writing, like I said, document everything,
Right.
you know, time, date, and say that you're a person with a disability. You don't have to give away your diagnosis. You don't have to say, I have depression, that's why I need my emotional support animal. You just say, I'm a person with a disability. My dog helps me alleviate the symptoms of my disability. You might want to go into, you know, say for depression, you know, with reorienting myself, or, you know, whatever you would want to reveal, and submit that in writing to your landlord. And then they are entitled to ask for a doctor's note. But again, the doctor's note does not need to say the diagnosis, the treatment, anything. Just, this is a person with a disability and this dog helps them with their disability. Please grant the reasonable accommodation. And then from there, that should be granted. We've had some cases where coming in on the intake line where I've, you know, put in the actual regulations to landlords, and they're not going to go back and say, oh, we were wrong, we were discriminating, but now we've got crickets over there. So it's a little, sometimes you just need to assert your rights a little bit, and the landlord doesn't want to come back at you. If they do come back at you with an eviction, just remember that that is a defense in the unlawful detainer for the denial of a reasonable accommodation. So that's where it comes into documenting that.
Absolutely, because if it isn't in writing, it's what? It's not so, right? So we
Yeah, I
definitely
mean,
want
you
to make
don't
sure
need to
that
put
it's
it in writing by the law, but you do if you want to have to enforce your rights later.
Sure, sure. My next thing that I wanted to ask, and I believe this was someone was speaking about Section 8, and I think it was Miss Nunn. Miss Nunn said something about Section 8, and I know we got Parisa on the phone. How you doing, Miss Maksudi? I hope you're doing well. But the reason I'm saying that is because Section 8 is so important. People are denied or even evicted because they know they got Section 8. They don't care. You go find something somewhere else. How does it work with the person who is on Section 8 that may lose their Section 8 because they're being evicted? How would that work? Grace, can you help with that question? Can anybody chime in on that?
I think that might have actually been Nora covering the source of income discrimination. California passed a law, I guess it was last year or 2 years ago, that prohibited landlords from discriminating against people who utilize Section 8 vouchers. But Nora, do you have any response to the question about how Section 8 and eviction kind of overlap and what happens in those cases?
Let me just give you a little background on that. The only reason I ask is a lot of seniors who have Section 8, it's a lot of people with disabilities have them. There's certain family members may have them. It's just a concern that if they're on Section 8, they're on a fixed income. They know they have to abide by the rules of the road in order to get that. All of a sudden, they find that they couldn't make that payment for whatever reason. Something happened. They couldn't make that payment. How is that going to affect that person on Section 8? Nora.
That's a very good question. And I don't work specifically with the agencies that provide these vouchers, but I will say that it is important to remember that the moratoriums generally apply to all tenants, including those on subsidies. So it is those tenants, although they do have their vouchers and they may feel safe, it's important that they're also informed about the moratoriums. And how they can kind of blend, if they need to do a rent deferment or pay only a portion or pay late, how they can do so without hindering the relationship that they have with the agency that's giving them the subsidy or the voucher. Unfortunately, I don't know the nitty gritty of that, but that's where I would start.
Okay, and I think you did answer it. They can't discriminate because of the subsidy. I think that's the most important thing, and getting it out to the community, where the community will know that, that they have these rights, even though they're on a fixed income. Because if they don't have that knowledge, then they don't know any better at that juncture.
Yeah, California does protect source of income discrimination. So wherever your income is coming from, and when I say income, I mean wherever your rent payment is coming from, whether it's a voucher or a local, city public rental assistance, that all is protected. The landlord can't say it has to be from an employer or it has to be, like a paycheck. Anything that you can use to pay the rent should be accepted.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that with me. It was also stated that I wrote a note. I didn't write a name by it, but I'm making my notes here, right? I'm trying to keep up with everything. But it was stated that it's a possibility that I believe it will be toward the latter part of December. They are talking about perhaps like 25%. Someone stated about 25% of the rents. And I want to say that it was perhaps CAT. Perhaps.
That was, I think, related to AB 15, which is the state eviction moratorium legislation, and the extension there requires that renters pay at least 25% of the rent to.
Or they have to show a declaration is.
But they have to do that declaration monthly, correct?
If they're unable to pay the 25%.
Okay.
Please stop me if I'm misquoting. I think.
So are we saying? I mean, I'm just trying to get a better understanding, because that could be good and it cannot be so good. It depends on if they're saying 25% of the monthly amount, or are they saying 25% of the back rent that is owed also? So that 25% isn't being defined, or is it just the monthly? I see Grace shaking her head. Help us out.
Grace
is
looking
for you, Grace.
It's 25% either month to month or 25% by the end of the month of total back rent that is from September to January. However, I do want to say this with a caveat, which is like why it's very hard for all of us to actually do the education on this, is this will change next week. And also, there's also a local moratorium, which has other things, and even how those interact, because right now, there are conversations like AB 3088 doesn't allow for local jurisdictions and municipalities to come up with their own, eviction moratorium. We don't know if that is still going to be extended in AB 15, because there's like a lot of sausage being made right now on the Capitol steps. And I do have to go because I am a meeting with actual other, one just to plug on this is that, as Kat said, as many people have said, is that San Diego doesn't have rent control. It's one of the major regions in California that doesn't have robust, significant tenant protections. And what that has done is created this like lack of infrastructure to protect people and also know where to go. And so what many of us on this call have been doing is like building the ship while we're sailing it, like building those infrastructures, sharing this information like we're doing right now, and educating as many people in different ways and making ourselves available in different ways. And also having to prepare people to fight, because the lawyers on this call probably would love to appreciate this, is that if they got clients with all the evidence ready for them and they actually had laws to fight on, that would make their job easier. And for us as activists and people who want to fight, we are the ones that have to push for those laws, right? We have to push the city council. We got to push, like showing up next Tuesday is going to be key. Calling our senators like Ben Wesso and Tony Atkins, cancel the rent and, stop all evictions. Those are going to be key. Tenants knowing what their rights are is going to help them assert those rights, because It's going to take all of us to protect our communities. I do have to go. We are creating, ACE has been doing, and I have also done this on behalf of the Cancel Rent Coalition, creating a basic know your rights of how to navigate this. We refer to the agencies on this call, including like legal aid. Right now, there's a different process for people who are undocumented. But if people have eviction notices or have questions around tenant counseling, they can call any of our groups. But if you will have like a court case, you get a court summons, please, for the love of God, call legal aid, call CSA, call Disability Rights Center, because that's moving into a legal front. But that's the big pitch I wanted to give people.
Thank you so much, Grace.
Yeah, and I put my contact information there. And if people are interested in just a know your rights training, I can definitely share that with Michael and you, Derek, so you can share it with other people. But that's just on Zoom to know basic stuff. I'm not a lawyer.
Excellent. Excellent.
Thank you very much. I've got to go.
Thank you so much. You know what? Before you leave, though, I want to ask all my people that have spoken today, we need to do this again because we should be full right now. We should have a couple of hundred people here right now at least. Okay, so we're going to do this again because it's not over yet. We all know that, correct? So it's going to happen. We just have to work at it. We'll get with the president, see what she says, and we'll just follow through and try to educate the community as much as possible that you have resources that you can help them with. And Grace, I want to thank you for your time. I know you do have to leave. I'm going to take a couple more questions from a couple of people. I see Nicole Johnson has joined us. So since we already saw her story, I'm going to ask Nicole. Nicole, would you like to say something? I saw your hand earlier, but I don't want to ignore you either because we had an opportunity to look at the video. Are you there? Nicole? Okay.
I'm here. I'm here. Can you hear me? Hi. I had to figure out how to admit it.
All right.
Yay.
Hey, Nicole, thank you so much.
I'm just sitting here just listening, but yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Thank you so much for allowing us to see the video of what you were going through. We're sorry you had to go through that, but I'm glad you got some results and some outcome from it because it is very hard when you don't know your rights. And can I ask you a question? How'd you find out about the tenants union?
Well, actually, Kat was a neighbor of mine down the way. I knew she was with Cop Watch, but I didn't know she was with the tenant union until I started having problems.
Got it.
And she started helping me with it. But I was having problems early on as soon as I moved in. And I was previously homeless before I got my Section 8. So I was new to Section 8 and I didn't know what my rights actually were once I got it. And once I moved into my apartment, I was literally there for 3 weeks with the last of everything that I had. And I had a flood, a black water sewage flood all through my home. The management, she did not send me the proper help for at least a week. So I moved out of my house and went to my grandmother's home. And 3 weeks after the first flood, I had a second flood because they did a quick fix. And I lost most of my property. And I started telling her, you know, I didn't know all my rights, but I knew some. So I told her I wasn't going to give her any more rent until she fixed everything that was wrong because I had 2 floods within 3 weeks. My first flood was a week before Christmas. My second flood was on New Year's Day.
Whoa. Wow.
She didn't do anything until February 7th, I believe, for both floods. So I was out of my home for all that time. And then once I started being, you know, pressuring her, then she started threatening me with evictions and everything. And it was like, she didn't even sign the proper paperwork for Section 8. Section 8 was contacting me to get in contact with her for her to finish her job with them. So it's like, I was just in a hard place as a single mom because I lost everything. She didn't give me anything back and she wanted rent money.
So let me ask you a question then. So now that you've went through all of that with her, sounds like you got it straightened out on that part. How are you doing now? What's going on with Nicole now?
Well, right now we're in a really good place, but since I stopped working, you know, unemployment has taken a standstill with what they're doing. So now my owner now is like, where's the rest of the rent? Where's the rest of the rent? And I haven't contacted anyone because I know I can afford to pay it. It's just the fact that now I'm waiting for unemployment to figure out their issues and release the rest of my funds. So, but besides that, we're really in a good place. The owner that I have, he's a really decent owner. He works with us. He doesn't, you know, he's not taking his tenants for granted. The other place I was at, they were taking their tenants for granted. They were taking all the money and they weren't doing anything. There were roaches in the homes. I had neighbors upstairs from me. I was in a duplex and they were from Africa. And because they were from Africa, they tried to convince me that my neighbors were dirty. They were the reason I had roaches and they were the reason that everything was wrong. And I know that that was not the fact. You know, I actually was in their home, you know, I got to know them and I know that they were not the reason for the roaches or anything else that was going on, but the management tried to make me believe that it was their fault because they were refugees.
It just wasn't the manager's fault is what she said, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was the whole management company's fault.
Right, exactly. So here's what I'll say to you. We want to thank you for allowing us to see that video. We're sorry what your family went through. However, now you definitely know you have not just one person to help fight your battle. You got a whole team here. And all these people are after the same thing, keeping you in a good, safe, and sound and secure home. So I think you're going to be much better off being on this conversation today, being in this conversation. And I think you got a whole team that's going to be backing you going forward. So we hope you don't have to deal with it anymore, because one day we want you to be a homeowner. That's my inner spirit. But
that's my inner spirit.
So it's going to happen. We just have to claim things sometime, but we thank you.
Oh, I've already claimed it. And I know Section 8 also has a program that helps us become homeowners. I'm just trying to get there. You know, I've been in this place a little over a year now. So I'm just trying to get back on my feet completely. And that way I can work on that next program.
Continue to stay blessed. And we appreciate you again. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you so much.
It's getting to the end of our time. If there's any other questions, please ask it now.
I have one question.
Yes.
What about the rent control?
What about the rent control? What's your specific question? Because these people can answer it for you.
Will we ever get it?
Well, I can't say for sure. But
So,
you want to take
if
that?
I can just make an ad, I think Rafael Bautista, one of the founders of the San Diego Tenants Union, and was pushing for rent control with San Diego Tenants United before we unionized. I think he's been pushing this since 2014. You know, people love builders.
Yes.
Builders create jobs.
But in the city of San Diego, there is so much property here, and there's so much homeless here.
Yeah.
And it all is blamed on rent control. You know, the state of California is expensive and all of our rents are going up. I'm in a 2-bedroom right now, and my owner, he wants to go up on my rent, and I've only been there a little over a year, and he wants to go up by $200. And you know, right now we're in a crisis, so no one can afford that. So it's like we're begging for rent control.
Yeah, yeah. Just to cap the rent, because you know,
there's no cap on it.
Yeah, what's affordable housing today won't be affordable housing tomorrow.
No, and it's sad because I'm in a 2-bedroom apartment, and I know I'm on this right now, but I'm just gonna say I pay extra due to the fact that my rent is a little over, so I pay the difference. And you know, Section 8 doesn't like that, but they don't understand that. That's what we have to do. We have to pay the difference to have a place to live, because there's no cap on the rent. So the owners can go up whenever they want. And when they go up, we just have to suffer the difference, you know?
Well, it's not just you itself, because, and when I say that is because you're one demographic, but it's also you have your seniors in that same position, your people with disabilities with the same position, because they're on fixed incomes. So there is a change that will come, but also you need to join one of these organizations because you have a good voice for letting people know how you feel.
Oh, she's with the tenant union. She with the tenant union.
And go down to City Hall and raise some sand with those guys down there. Go to and let them know what's happening, because we.
Well, you know, I try. I do. You know, it's just little on me, and I do the best I can. I do a little bit of work in the community. You know, I'm all for cat and the cop watch. So if I see something going on wrong, I always put my video camera on and I speak up for what I see wrong. But
Well,
it's a lot wrong.
Okay, so I thank you again, but I need this attorney. She got her hand raised. I don't want to ignore her because she's an attorney. She may come after me.
Yes, go ahead. No, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
So Ms. Parisa, was your hand up? Hi.
Yes, and I apologize. My computer's frozen.
How you doing, lady? How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see everybody. Thank you for putting this on.
Good, good.
So very briefly on rent control, I want to just echo what my colleagues have said. San Diego, unlike similarly situated jurisdictions in the state of California, does not have rent control. It stands alone in that. And that is one of the main reasons we are in the housing crisis we're in, and we have the homeless situation that we have. And that's simply due to not having willpower by our elected officials. We now have a supermajority Democratic controlled city council, Democratic mayor, and a majority Democratic board of supervisors. So I applaud my allies, my colleagues on this call for their legislative push. Also, I popped into the chat box a really helpful list of 7 myths and facts when it comes to rent control, including rent control does not disincentivize housing production. It's a good article. I wrote it. That's why I put it in there. I encourage folks to take a look at it and talk to Rafael Batista. He has great expertise on this. I also have some sample ordinances from other jurisdictions in that chat box. And then very briefly on Section 8, the reason folks are paying more than they should on Section 8, so they're paying the difference between what the voucher is and what the rent is because San Diego is not doing what it needs to do to ensure protections for Section 8 tenants. And so there's a pending lawsuit right now regarding that, which includes NAACP and the San Diego Tenants Union. And Rafael Batista is very well versed in that, as is Ms. Francine Maxwell. So I just want to share that information. What folks are dealing with who have Section 8 is it's not okay, and we're hoping it gets resolved very soon.
Thank you, Ms. Parisa, for that.
Thank you.
You said Rafael Batista, not my Rafael Batista. That guy, I know that guy from way back when we were, well, that's another story. That's many years ago. How you doing, Rafael? Good to see you again, man.
I'm good. Back when we were in Utopia, remember, Derek?
Exactly. Then I bought the company, but that's another story. But with that being said, I want to take the time. We're going to finish right on time. I do appreciate everyone today. I think we had a good forum of people that gave us the knowledge, the power, and some will to get out there and make some change. I think Nicole Johnson is going to be a good advocate for housing. And somebody needs to scoop her up. I love her voice and her attitude with that. And I just think that this was very good. And I want to take the time again to thank Michael for what he did. I know Mr. Barnum was a part of that. Steve was a part of this. Everybody who worked on the committee for this. Henry, we want to thank you for staying with us as long as you did, so you can relay this back to Monica Stepp. We appreciate her and her allowing you to be with us today. And we're looking forward to working with the council members. We want to make sure, we know District 4 is loved and it's the hub of everything, but we also want to make sure that the people in the community and outside of that community get the knowledge and skills that they need to stay in their homes. So again, we want to thank everybody. I hope, can I get a hand raise of all those people who will come back to another one of these if we put another presentation on like this? I'm talking to my speakers. I'm looking for speaker hands too. All right, okay, good. It's coming, so you'll be hearing from us again. Thank you all. Have a blessed day. Take care of yourself, take care of your family. And the NAACP of San Diego, thanks you for your time and energy. Have a great day.
Sorry, let me just jump in real quick. I just wanted to share a slide with the contact info that was.
Sure. Are you taking, I'm sorry, I'm glad you said that, Mike. See, that's why you're doing all this logistical stuff. Are you taking those things that were put over in the chat? Can we get those things taken out of the chat at some point and sent
Yes.
out to the people that are on this Zoom meeting, please?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to save the chat log and any resources that were shared there and any resources that were previously emailed, I'm going to put them all together and we'll be sure to make that available.
Thank you.
Real quickly, Michael, the video, it's being recorded and you'll send us out.
Yeah, it's being recorded. We'll find some way to share it.
Okay.
I'll work with the NAACP leadership, the branch leadership to make it available.
So you're just putting this one slide up, Mike, is what you're doing?
Yeah, I just wanted to share this one slide. It's got just some contact info that was shared. So I just wanted to make that available.
That's perfect. If you didn't take a picture of it, take a picture of it, folks. It's worth having. Raphael, I'll talk to you later. You all take care. God bless. And we'll see you around soon. Thank you. Have a great day.
Everyone.